because the lesson today, we'll take it from Mark chapter 4. It's an incredible story there that there's so much to learn from. It's about Jesus right after he finished speaking with the crowds. Asked his disciples, okay, just get in the boat and go across on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. So Jesus got into the boat with the disciple, and of course he was tired, probably after speaking and being with the masses. And he got into the back of the ship with the disciple. You know, the disciples started going across the sea, and he fell asleep. So this is where the story picks up in Mark chapter 3, as a matter of fact. In verse 35, this is what happens. So they're crossing the sea, right? The Sea of Galilee is not a very big sea. But as they're crossing the sea, it says in verse 35, on that day, when the evening had come, he said to them, let us go over on the other side. And so they got into the boat, they're moving over to go on the other side of the sea. And a big windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so much that the boat was already filled. Not just filled. It was full of water. Okay, so, and he himself was in the stern, that is Jesus, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and told him, teacher, do you not care that we are dying? So that is the lesson for today. Don't you care that we are dying? Because you know what? There's so many times in our life that we have kind of the same mindset. We are going through life and we feel that life is pretty tough. And then sometimes you wonder where Jesus is. And you wonder, is like, are you sleeping? In this case, certainly he was sleeping. Certainly he was sleeping. And you know what happens next? What happens next? Actually, let me see. So the disciples were amazed that Jesus could sleep through such tumult. Can you imagine? I mean, how can a person sleep? The boat was like sinking, full of water. So they woke him up and promptly rebuked him. Right? They rebuked Jesus. What are you doing sleeping? Jesus, are you kidding me? So they rebuked the Lord, and then Jesus arose, and of course he rebuked the wind and the waves, and of course the scripture says there was a great calm. I like it how one translation puts it. Mark 4:39 reads, the wind ran out of breath and the sea became smooth as glass. It's not like, okay, everything is fine. Jesus speaks and the sea becomes smooth as glass. I don't know if you can imagine being ever to a lake. Some of you that love fishing, you've been like that, and you throw and it just ripples against, because the water, you can like walk on it. It's like a mirror. And that's how the Sea of Galilee was on that day, just in an instant when Jesus says, quiet, be still. So, of course, Jesus rebuked the disciples for having so little faith, but instead of having their fear somehow reduced, oh, I'm so glad now, no more. They are even more afraid of Jesus. More afraid of Jesus that they are of the storm. In Mark chapter 40, verse 40 says, but they say to them, Jesus says, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? The issue that Jesus is having with the apostles here is that they had no faith. Not little faith, no faith. In their mind, they already saw their boat laying on the bottom of the ocean, probably of the sea. That's what was happening in their mind. They had zero faith to say, maybe we should have faith. And you know, that's what happens in our lives. When we feel like, it doesn't have to be in the middle of a sea, right? Things are happening in your life and you feel that things are so out of control. And you feel like all hope is lost. It's, what am I doing now? It's like you have no faith and you think this is the end. As opposed to pause and say, hey, where is your faith? Where is your faith? So, again, the disciples were quite terrified. And then they said, what sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? Can you imagine? I mean, right. That's what's so special about Jesus. More unique than any other religious leaders, any other prophets, any other messengers, any other men of God or not, or fake or whatnot. Nobody can stop the elements. Nobody can tell to the wind, hush, be quiet. And you know why? Because there's nobody No other person sent by God other than Jesus Christ, that is God himself, because only God can do that. Only God can have power over the wind and over the waves. There's nobody, not Muhammad, no Joseph Smith, no Alan G. White, no matter which leader you're following, unless you're following Christ, because Christ is the only one that is God. Everybody else is just a human being that died and rots in the grave. But Jesus was God, because only God can do what Jesus did on that day. So the lesson for us is that Jesus certainly calms the storms in our lives, but the nuance there is that he waited for the apostles actually to get to him, to call him to do that. So for our lives, whenever we want maybe Jesus to intervene, maybe we need to ask him too. He may tell us, where is your faith too? But that is the main lesson, and that's a very easy lesson to draw, the fact that in our lives, Jesus, God, can quiet the storms. Whatever storm is going on right now in your life, by faith, you could pass whatever storm it is. Whatever thing you're going right now, you think is so terrible. I don't know what you may think it is. You may think it's COVID. You may think it's some other disease. You may think it's a cancer that a loved one is struggling with. You may think it's a job. You may think it's any danger that is happening in your life right now, any storm. Jesus can calm that storm. And that is one lesson, and we're not going to focus too much on that. Another lesson that I want to focus today is the fact that God takes over when our strength is gone, when it seems that we've done everything we could. Did you know that? God does not just take it over for you. God lets you. If you haven't learned this lesson up to this moment in your life, know that when you're about to face something difficult, God does not say, you know what, that's just too hard for you. Let me do it for you. You have to do your best. You need to try to do everything you can first. You know? And that actually builds up your faith. You know, it makes you feel better if you actually do it yourself. Of course, knowing that God is always there. But you need to know that God takes over. It's kind of like a system. If you can see it throughout the Old Testament. We're going to have a few examples in the New Testament. God takes over when our strength is gone. And actually, in the book of 1 Kings, we have an incident there that I wanted to visit about King Ahab there and Jezebel. This happens right after, if you remember, Elijah had that battle with the prophets of Baal, and they wanted to bring a sacrifice, and of course Elijah brought a sacrifice and the fire coming from heaven. You know the story, but this is right after that. So I'm going to read this section in 1 Kings chapter 19, starting from, I'm going to read from 1 through 4. There it says, and Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he executed all the prophets with the sword. Remember, that's what he did after what happened. He took the sword and he killed all the prophets. You know how many? 450. Jezebel was not a happy camper. So then Jezebel sent a message to Elijah saying, so let the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them that you just murdered by tomorrow about this time. That was a bold statement. And when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life, right? That is Elijah. He ran for his life. He got terrified and went to Beersheba, which belonged to Judah, and left his servant there. Verse 4, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat under a broom tree. And he prayed that God may take his life. And he said, it's enough now, Lord, take my life, for I'm no better than my husband. Can you say he was at the end of his rope? My father's. Thank you. Can you say that he was at the end of his rope? He thought it's over. That Jezebel was a very powerful woman, and she was going to kill him. So standing for God sometimes makes us feel that we are standing alone against the world, doesn't it? He felt he was alone. Everybody was out to get him. Later on, he tells God that it's just me. Everybody is just, it's just me left. I'm the only one. Taking refuge under the, what kind of shade a broom tree can provide, not a whole lot. Can you imagine being in the desert here in the Joshua tree and you're so hot and you go under the broom tree? Good luck. It's probably going to drop the temperature by what, 0.5 degrees? Yeah, not going to work. So Elijah, the mighty prophet, stood for God boldly, yet here he was alone, deserted, nobody with him, and all in the desert and ready to die. And you know, sometimes we may be in that situation to where we get into a place and we feel like it's over. I'm just going to give up. It's just not worth it. It's just too much. Elijah felt alone, but God nourished him actually and led him to a place where he would get some much needed instructions and help. You see, when he got to the end of his rope, when there's no more help, that's when God intervened. God didn't intervene way before. He waited for Elijah to really get to the end of the rope so that maybe he had some message to send him, and maybe he had to be mentally prepared to be in that space in which he would maybe able to talk to him. And maybe this is something what happens with Job. God also had to take Job to a place so that he saw what were some of the things that maybe God wanted to help Job improve in his life. But continuing in 1 Kings chapter 19 verse 5, it says, then as he lay asleep under a broom, certainly an angel touched him. So you see, God at the end, right when he was over to probably just say I'm done, an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. Then he looked, and there by his head was a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. Pretty cool. You're in the desert, you're starved, you're hungry. Angel touches you and you have some cakes on coal, freshly baked. Nice jar of water. Pretty cool. That's going to lift up your mood, right? So he ate and drank, the scripture says, and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came back the second time and touched him and said, arise, eat. He had to eat again because the journey is too great for you. Acknowledge, maybe it's just too much. You need to eat again, get more strength. So he arose and ate and drank and went, and the strength of that food, 40 days and 40 nights. He went on the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights. He went further away from Miss Jezebel, as far as Horeb, the mountains of God. So you see, he was in such a bad spot in his life. And this is Elijah. And God helps him right when he was ready to give up. God helps him when he comes to that place. And you know, in our lives, brothers and sisters, sometimes, unfortunately, it's because we are too proud. It's because we just keep on resisting the Lord, maybe, not wanting to just acknowledge him, not wanting to have faith in him, not wanting to cast our fears and all the troubles on him, and we just constantly try. And obviously, we have not reached bottom, because if you reach bottom, you can say, God, that's it. Just kind of like what Elijah did. So I'm encouraging you, everyone, do not allow yourself to be so low to where you're ready to die before you come to that place of desperation to where you have to ask God. Ask God before that. Go to God in faith. Seek God's counsel. Bring him into your life. Do not allow yourself to be in that situation, kind of like what Elijah says when he says, God, kill me now. I'm ready to die. And you know, it's sad because sometimes even Christians find themselves in that predicament to where they are ready to just die. Really? You still have a lot of life left. God has other plans with you. Obviously, he had more plans with Elijah. And he has more plans with every single one of us. So, God took over when Elijah's strength was gone. The Lord had called him aside to help him regain his focus. He needed physical and spiritual strength, and God helped him get that. See, he had to go to God, and God gave that to him. And that's a beautiful example for us to know that at God you can find that. God will provide that for you. And then it wasn't long after he arrived, because he was going towards Mount Sinai, that Elijah heard the voice of God, actually. Heard the voice of God, but instead of giving him instructions or sympathy, the Lord asked him a question that Elijah probably thought it was ridiculous, because he asked him, let's see the question he asked. In verse 9 says, and There he went into a cave and spent the night in that place, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, Elijah, what are you doing here? Can you imagine being Elijah, running from Jezebel? God just fed you, and then God comes to you and says, what are you doing here? He must have said, like, are you kidding me, Lord? Is this a joke? I mean, you don't know what's going on? And let's see how Elijah said. Elijah responded and said, I have been very zealous for you, Lord, pretty much tells him. For the children of Israel have forsaken your covenants, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. He had a pretty rough life, pretty much. And, you can almost see the attitude in the way he responds to God. This is not the only time you see interaction between God and a spiritual person to where the person has a little bit of chip on his shoulder. Don't get me wrong, Elijah was in a bad spot, right? I mean, he almost died. He got, angel fed him. Obviously, he was near death. I'm confident that he probably was going to die if the angel would not have come to touch him and encourage him to eat. So you can hear it pretty much in Elijah's attitude. Pretty much, in case you have missed something, Lord, I'm running for my life because I've done everything you wanted me to do. And of course, now they're rejecting me, and that Jezebel, witch trying to kill me, right? So God knew why he was there. The Lord had led him there, but God wanted Elijah to do some soul searching. There's a sermon actually I'm preparing about the fact that God asks questions, Jesus asks questions. There's an instance to where Jesus goes to a blind man and says, what do you want me to do to you? He's like, Lord, that I may see. He's like, what, Jesus didn't know that he was blind? But the same thing happened here. God is asking Elijah a question, what are you doing? So he's pushing Elijah to do some soul searching. Pretty much maybe figure out where you are, right? In order for you to go somewhere, first you need to know where you are, like GPS. You need to know where you are before you can go somewhere. So that's kind of what happens here. So Elijah believed he was alone against the world and that his actions made no difference. And you know what? Sometimes we feel like that. We feel maybe sometimes that we are alone. Do you ever feel that you're alone? I felt like that sometimes. And especially, even as kids, especially, you could be in the school system, in the public school system. You go there and you barely can find someone that, you can say, oh, I think that person also believes in God. There's so much against God that is preached in school, to where they mock you if you say that, oh, I believe in the Word of God. They're going to mock you. They're going to think that you're just stupid. From teachers, from the leaders of the school district. And I will tell you that as far as I'm concerned, with everything that's going on, not to mention with how they're pushing sexual education doctrine and, having, teaching it, it's very hard to keep up. Because you know what, me and my kids, I maybe spend an hour here and there, but they go to school and they're indoctrinated for like 7-8 hours every single day. And if you hear it too much, it's very hard to really balance. You come home and say, okay, kid, I'm going to deprogram you. What did you learn today? Let me take it out of your mind with a plier. So as parents, we have to keep that in mind as we let our kids into the world. And I'll tell you, as far as me and my wife are concerned, I'll tell you this because I don't want to keep it a secret. We have decided that actually this year, we are pulling both Mark and Ava out of school. They're no longer going to be... and they're going to go to an online private school. So no more going to school and being indoctrinated by the government on what to think and what to study. So, and Elena, she's off to college now, but also it is very important for parents to know what goes into the mind of their teachers. I don't know what this is going to mean for me and Lisa, because obviously it's not going to be free, but there's a price to pay one way or the other. As far as me and Lisa is concerned, our goal in life is that we're going to go to heaven, and we want to take all of our children with us in heaven. That is the number one goal. And I feel as a father that it's very hard to do that if we just allow them to be educated by the Desert Sands Unified School District. But I'm encouraging you to weigh your option and know that although it might cost you something right now, the price that you may pay for that is that you are messing with their eternal salvation. They're messing with their eternity, because the chances of them being lost and being into the world and worldly is much higher. But I just want to add that as a segue there, because he felt like he was alone in the world. Sometimes we feel like we are against in the world. Certainly for us adults, it's easier to handle bullies that happen around us, but for a kid, it's very hard. My Ava, she's so quiet and never speaks. She would never challenge somebody to say, what are you talking about, a teacher? You don't know what you're talking about. She would never say that. Or even in a kind way. But I know she feels sometimes that everybody's against her, that nobody believes, the Bible, and nobody believes in God, even among teachers when she's being ridiculed. So we're not going to have any more of that. But as Christians, we have the ability to know that there will be moments like that, and then we need to turn to God. And just like, and sometimes we may feel like our action makes no difference, but when you turn to God, God can guide us. God can guide us. And it may not happen like a miraculous way, like God is going to bring you 2 cups of cakes on the coals, in a miraculous way like that, or who knows. But in a real sense of the world, I'll tell you that when it comes to myself and my children, it's as if God spoke to me. Don't send the kids to the school, back into the school district anymore. Especially now they're Christians. You don't want to send them back into the world, spend there 8 hours every day. So, and the Lord then opened this opportunity to this. Actually, it's the Christian school. I know somebody that sends their kids there, and that is potentially going to make them not so alone. And whenever you may feel alone, just turn to God and pray to God and ask that God will make opportunities for you to open doors for you so that you may not feel so alone. And this is kind of what happened with him here. So God doesn't always clarify his will in an obvious matter, but God does speak to you. In 1 Kings chapter 19, as a matter of fact, there it says, and he said, go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, and behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks into pieces before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. So it was when Elijah heard it that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? Maybe that's how Elijah knew he was God, because he said the same thing he told him earlier. But you see, a normal person would think that, when the Lord passes, it's got to be something huge. It's got to be like an earthquake. It's got to be like a big fire. But no, sometimes, in this situation, God is that small voice. So expect in your life that God will speak to you in that still small voice. That's how God communicated with Elijah. And that's how sometimes God communicates with you. You just have to be quiet and calm and listen to God's voice. I have an illustration about a long time ago. Before the refrigerators, people used ice houses to preserve their food. Some of you may know. They would actually go into lakes when it was in the winter, and they'll chop like big pieces of ice, and then they'll bring and put them in these houses, actually thick walls, and they would just line up with sawdust all around, and then they'll put ice there, a bunch of ice, and then that ice will stay there as ice like well into the summer, if you can imagine. Pretty cool, right? Nowadays you just go in the freezer. Pretty cool. But it didn't used to be like that. So one man one day lost a valuable watch while he was working in an ice house, and he searched and searched, but he could not find it. Through the sawdust, didn't find it. And his fellow workers also looked, but they could not find that watch. And a small boy who heard about the loss slipped into the ice house, apparently in the middle of the night one day, and found the watch. And amazed, the man is like, what happened? How in the world did you find it? We turned that thing upside down. And the boy said, I closed the door, I lay down in the sawdust and kept very quiet until I was able to hear the watch ticking. And I will tell you, brothers and sisters, often the reason why we don't hear God's voice is because we are not able to just get to that place to where we are listening, because God speaks to you in that still small voice. So often again, the question is not whether God is speaking, but whether we are being still enough and quiet enough to listen. I mean, if you go home and you turn on Hulu and Netflix, and every day you bombard your mind with activities, phone call, emails, and then 2 o'clock in the morning comes, like, okay, you fall asleep with the remote in your hand. When is God going to speak to you? God will speak with you, but you need to keep still, to listen, to wait, calm your mind. That's what it says, meditate on His will. Think about Him. Allow Him to speak to you, and He will speak to you. And I'll tell you, He will speak to you the same way that He spoke to me when He told me, okay, I'm not losing my mind. I'm not it wasn't like with a big light. But I just knew in my heart that God wanted me to take my kids out of the school system. And I know He's going to provide. He's going to find a way. Yeah, it's going to be more expensive than free, but it's not free. There's no such thing as free. So, sometimes in our lives we will face difficult situations, but we must remember that the Lord is not far from us and that He will never fail to guide us. So God will speak to us if we will get along with Him and tune in. The rest of the world and His voices, hard as it is, to tune out all the voices of the world and just tune in only on His voice. This is my last illustration of the sermon today. Apparently, this was a true story. A man by the name of Max Dupree related the following heart-touching story. He says that Esther, my wife, and I have a granddaughter named Zoe. She was born prematurely, a granddaughter. Okay, so it was his daughter, had a baby. She was born prematurely and weighed 1 pound 7 ounces, so small that my wedding ring could slip up her arm to her shoulder, right? Really preemie. And the neonatologist who first examined her told us that she had 5 to 10% chance of living 3 days. Pretty sad. So when Esther and I, his wife, scrubbed up to have the first visit with Zoe, she was in the neonatal intensive care unit. And she had 2 IVs, he says, one in the navel, one in the foot, and a monitor on each side of her chest, and a respirator. You can imagine all kinds of tubes coming out. And to complicate matters, he says that Zoe's biological father had jumped ship the month before Zoe was born. Realizing this, apparently a wise and caring nurse named Ruth gave me instruction. This is the father, okay? Gave me instructions, and the instructions were as such. For the next several months, at least for the next several months, you are the surrogate father. I want you to come to the hospital every day to visit Zoe. And when you come, I want you to rock her body and her legs and arms with the tip of your fingers, right? While you're caressing her, you should tell her over and over how much you love her, because she has to be able to connect your voice to your touch. Think about it. You know, a human being needs that, needs the voice and needs the touch. And actually the connection that it has made here is that God knew that we also needed both His voice and His touch. So He gave us not only the Word, but His Son. And He gave us not only Jesus, but also His body as the church. And I love this because we are the body of Christ. And you know what? In our interaction with one another, what we are supposed to do is to touch each other. My cat does that sometimes. I don't understand. I'm on the bed. I know it's because he loves me. Love my cat. It's crazy. He comes to me. He does this to me. He does that. Don't they do that? Was that? Yeah, they do that. It's like a sign of affection. I don't know what it is, but they need you. Thank you. Yes. But I'll tell you, brothers and sisters, us as individuals, and I had a sermon not too long ago how we need touch, to be touched by others. You know, we are not like a piece of ice, right? We are supposed to be interacting with one another. And with God, He touches us through the church, which is the body. So that is why I'm suggesting that the importance of us coming together, the importance of us giving each other hugs, shake hands, even in this era of COVID, it's something, a very organic need that Christians have to come together and to provide that comfort to one another, just as this preemie baby needed on that day. I don't know what happened with him, but I thought it's a very important story. And to know that sometimes maybe if you have something missing, that maybe you need the touch of the body of Christ. You need the touch from some brothers and sisters that could help you, not just having the Word of God. Okay? So, one of my last slides is I want to draw your attention to the book of Psalm. In Psalm chapter 46, verse 3 says, though the waters roar and be troubled, and I want you to think about this passage and think about where you are right now, or in a moment where you're not in a great place. Because many people are not in a great place right now. Psalm 46 verse 3, this is probably one of the best passages, I believe, that it should be on our mind in this COVID until this is over. It says, though the waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake, there's a river. There is a river. So God sends peace like a river in the middle of chaos and confusion. No matter what happens to you, there it says that there is a river, and that is that something positive, there's something good that you should focus on. So whatever problems rage against us, God's Spirit is the ever-flowing river who sustains us and gives us gladness even while we are under siege. So his river of grace and peace flows through the middle of a Christian's life. Make no mistake about it. If you're a faithful Christian, you have a river of life going straight through. And that is the river that God provides for you, that he will not leave you alone. It's not that the people of God will be exempt from trouble, but God will be there with them in the midst of their trouble. And I want to end with probably the most positive passage in the Bible that I've seen in a while, in John the Apostle, actually, in the book of Revelation, saw a vision of heaven in Revelation chapter 22, verse 1 and 2. If you think heaven is too far, or if you're doubting. First two verses in Revelation 22. This is what happens right at the end. He says, and the angel showed me, this is the Apostle John, an angel showed John a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of its street and on either side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. So brothers and sisters, this is what we have to look up to. You think this life is hard? We're going to go and we're going to be there. If our life is faithful, we're going to go in heaven, and it's going to be this beautiful river. Me knowing the water so much, probably I'll be in the water a lot. But this water you drink and you never die. And that's the fruit of life, which I don't know what kind of fruit is that every month puts out different kind of fruit. But that's what's going to happen in heaven. Pretty amazing and pretty encouraging, because that is to happen in our future. So in conclusion, when trouble strikes, turn to God. God's promise to his people is the peace that flows like a river in the midst of turmoil. So in a time of trial, just like you turn to what you trust, you know that an alcoholic turns to the bottle, an addict turns to the drugs. But for us as Christians, we should turn to God. And if we turn to God, all things will be all right, no matter what comes your way. So that is my message for today. I really appreciate you staying awake. I don't think I put anybody to sleep today, but I appreciate you that you have listened so patiently. And at this time, we do extend invitation. If there's anybody here that has not obeyed the gospel, that there's something maybe in their life that they want to do to change, please come forward as together we'll stand and sing the invitation song that was